Driving is kind of pointless. Let me explain. I mean, it's not really pointless. Everybody who drives has a reason for it, I guess. Therefore, since we all assume we are rational beings and therefore just don't do things that are not the optimal choice, which also can include trying to optimize something, which doesn't have to mean that, yeah, well, that's just optimization, I guess. So basically, including all the variables. Also, not being able to optimize something is a variable. So therefore, it's already included in the optimization process. But if we now just analyze what actually happens if you drive, you basically, first of all, have to learn to drive. This happens over time, I guess, and you also get more experienced as you experience more driving. But the fundamental problem about the car that causes most of the accidents is not the car itself. It's just the human sitting in the car. And it's not that driving is pointless. I mean, up to this point in time, it served us pretty well for actually enabling things. But from this point in time on, and maybe a few years from now, we will actually not need to drive anymore. And this is something that obviously is due to technological advancements, such in self-driving especially, and also due to the advancement in processing power that actually enables the real-time analysis without using maps all the time, but just analyzing the data that we also analyze as a human driver. So basically the data of the road, also the sound and the vibrations, and just basically simulating a human driver. If you've ever driven on a highway, then it's pretty clear that humans are not really good at driving. And the main reason is, first of all, kind of the limited attention span, because as soon as driving is an almost automated process, and this is true for many people, I guess, but it's only true for the situations where you don't have to actually interrupt the automatic process of driving by actually doing something with your rational mind, like hitting the brake whenever there is a traffic jam, for example. The problem is that, I mean, it obviously kind of works, but at the same time, traffic is just the thing that produces one of the most accidents. It's basically one of the number one killers of humans worldwide. So humans are killed by other humans driving on roads, and this is not something entirely new. And if you ever have driven on a highway, it's just not something we are good at. I mean, it can function, but most of the time you just encounter situations again and again and again where the risk of, basically the danger, if you just take your own danger and the danger of others over time when driving, then whenever you drive on a highway, for example, it's essentially like it's just peaking all the time. And there are these situations that could turn into accidents any point in time. The only thing that is often missing is just a millisecond of somebody reacting too fast for it to be an accident. And I mean, that's nice for all the accidents that are avoided still by people, but it still is also true that most of the accidents are just caused by people and not by an error of machines. And also just the problem with emotions. If you drive on the road and you are emotional, or you are already emotional, or you drive usually emotionally, then this is just an entire other problem. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have emotions against other cars and against the humans in other cars. We don't even know who is in the other car and what they experience on a day-to-day basis or have experienced in the last day. It just doesn't really make sense. Nevertheless, if someone cuts us, for example, and for example tries to get in the lane or something like this, we just react with emotion, because that's something humans are kind of designed to be good at. And emotions down is something that's just, I guess, too difficult for many people. And I don't exclude myself here, obviously, but the thing is, I mean, I am looking forward into a future where we actually have vehicles. I mean, we already kind of have, but I'm not talking about I mean, just now, if you drive on the road, how many vehicles that drive fully automatically will you encounter? In most countries on this earth, almost no vehicles. Therefore, I am kind of awaiting a future, actually, and I'm looking forward to a future where you actually don't have to drive anymore. Because apart from this point about the risk, what also is happening that it's just a gigantic waste of time, because it's to a huge part automated, because you often don't really need to concentrate anymore, but sometimes you do, and this is a very tricky situation, because in the moments where you don't, and these are most of the moments, you just don't really have to pay attention. But whenever you then have to pay attention, you obviously should be able to pay attention within a millisecond. And this is also a problem on its own, because you get bored while driving. You can also listen to other things. You can also talk to people over the phone in a car. But these are all things that are then delaying the process of actually stepping in whenever you need to step in. Therefore, it's not really something. I mean, it's still useful up to this point in time, but it's also just a gigantic waste of time, because you have to use your primary time. You have to sit in a car and you cannot really do much of anything. You cannot really type at a notebook, or, I mean, you can call people, that works, but you cannot even have notes when calling people. The amount of things you can do, or all the things you can do in a car, the potential things you can do in a car, they are just very limited, or the range of possible things you can do. And this is also kind of a problem, because just think about all the hours that are wasted just by, nowadays, humans still driving in cars instead of just sitting in the car and letting the car drive itself while actually doing work, or while actually relaxing, or I don't know, but just using the time instead of for something better than just sitting there and just driving the car. Obviously, the statement that driving is pretty pointless is not really something that holds true for many different situations, but nevertheless, I had to title this video, and I didn't want to title it driving is kind of useful at this point in time for many situations, and therefore the clickbait title, I guess.